All right, let's talk about drones. They are literally everywhere, right? They're changing how we get packages, how we make movies, everything. But if you really want to understand where all this is headed, you've got to speak the language. So, welcome to the very first part of our new series, The Drone Dictionary. Together, we're going to build that vocabulary and create the ultimate guide to the world of unmanned flight. And how are we going to do that? Well, we've got a map. Our guide for this whole series is going to be this one incredible source, the Handbook of Unmanned Aerial Vehicles. Seriously, this thing is our foundation for everything we're about to explore together. And listen, this isn't just some textbook. The preface itself calls it a comprehensive treatise, and for a very good reason. It's basically a collection of the world's top minds on the subject. We're talking experts from universities, from the industry, and even from the government. We're getting a masterclass from the very people who are designing and regulating this tech as we speak. Now, I know what you're thinking. A giant handbook sounds a little intimidating, right? But the editors have a great way of looking at it. They say to think of it as a thesaurus or an encyclopedia, an essential tool for anyone in this field. So for us, let's just think of it as our official decoder ring for the super complex world of drones. So, where do we even begin? Well, the very first hurdle we have to clear is the language itself. Honestly, it's a total alphabet soup of acronyms out there, and it can be really, really confusing trying to figure out what it all means. You've heard these before, I'm sure of it. UAV, UAS, RPA. But what's the deal? Are these all just different ways of saying drone? Or is there a real difference? Even the handbook says the field has been plagued with different terms. So let's clear this up, right here, right now. Okay, this right here is the biggest distinction you need to know. On one side, you have the UAV, the Unmanned Aerial Vehicle. That's just the aircraft, the flying machine. Simple enough. But on the other side, you have the UAS, the Unmanned Aircraft System. And that S for system is the key. It's the entire operation. The vehicle, yeah, but also the ground control station, the data links, literally everything you need to make it fly. So think of it this way. The UAV is the airplane, but the UAS is the airplane plus the pilot's cockpit on the ground and the entire support crew. Okay, now that we have that definition down, let's do a little time traveling. You probably think of unmanned flight as, a 21st century thing. But the idea behind it, it's shockingly old, like thousands of years old. Just look at this timeline. 425 BC? Are you kidding me? That sounds completely impossible. How could anyone even think of an unmanned flying machine back in ancient Greece? What would that even look like? Well, believe it or not, here's the answer straight out of the handbook. According to historical texts, a Greek scholar named Archidas built what's considered the very first autonomous flying machine. It was a wooden bird, they called it the pigeon, and it was powered by steam. Now, obviously, it wasn't a drone as we know it, but it was the first ever documented example of a self-propelled unmanned object that could fly. It supposedly flew for about 200 meters, and then, well, it ran out of steam. So we've gone from an ancient wooden pigeon all the way to the super high-tech aircraft of today. The concept has evolved, and you know what? So has our language. So let's get back to that really important difference between a UAV and a UAS and see how one idea really grew into the other. Think about it like this. You start with the aircraft itself, the UAV. But on its own, it can't do anything. So you add a ground control station. That's where the operator sits. Then you need the communication links so you can actually talk to it. And finally, you need a way to get it into the air and get it back safely, your launch and retrieval gear. You put all those pieces together, and suddenly you don't just have a vehicle anymore. You've got a whole system, a UAS. And trust me, this isn't just about being picky with words. The move from saying UAV to UAS was a very deliberate choice by big organizations like the U.S. Department of Defense and the FAA. They wanted to make it super clear that these aren't just toys. They are complex aircraft systems. And that word implies that they need to be safe, they need to be regulated, and they need to prove they are airworthy, just like any passenger plane. Okay, to round out our dictionary for today, let's hit a few other terms you might hear. RPV, or remotely piloted vehicle, is an older term. You'd hear it back around the Vietnam War. The U.S. military often uses RPA, remotely piloted aircraft, because they want to specifically include the pilot in the name. And then you've got RPAS, remotely piloted air system. That's the one preferred by the UK and the International Civil Aviation Organization to really emphasize that there's always a man in the loop, a person in control. So let's take a breath.
We've set up a basic vocabulary, we know the huge difference between a simple vehicle and a whole system, and we even trace the idea all the way back to ancient Greece. But this is just the beginning of our journey.
And the crazy thing is, we have barely scratched the surface of the introduction to our handbook. What we've learned today is the key that unlocks the door to this huge, fascinating world. And our guide has 21 more sections just packed with detail waiting for us.
So what does that look like? Oh, we're going to get into the really cool stuff. In future explainers, we'll dive into how these things are actually designed. We'll look at bio-inspired UAVs, drones that are designed to fly like birds and insects. We'll cover propulsion systems, giant networked swarms of drones flying together, what true autonomy looks like. And yeah, we'll even get into the big social and ethical questions that come with all this technology.
So, we've started our dictionary, we've learned the basic grammar of unmanned flight. The question now is, with this new language, what are we ready to discover? We're going to find out next time.